And some people have a preference for one. And some people, one part dominates. And that's where the classes come from. They name in the soul whereby it reckons and reasons, rational. It's a reasonable part. There's a part that we use to reckon and reason. That's rational. That's the rational part of our mind. There's a part with which we crave and hunger and thirst, and we feel the flutter and titillation of other desires. It's irrational and it's appetitive. It's a companion of various repletions. Repletions, I'd look that up. It means like when you're full, you're replete with food. You're not hungry anymore. So there's the part of our psyche that is lustful, has appetites, craves pleasure, food, sex, sleep when we're tired, all those basic necessities, things that are necessities for survival, but also can turn into addictions and so forth. That's the appetite part of our psyche. And these two forms then, let us assume to have been marked off as actually existing in the soul. Again, they're having this conversation. But now the thumos, or principle of high spirit, that with which we feel anger, is it a third? I'm trying to figure that out. Is there three parts? Well, yes. But what when a man believes himself to be wronged, does not his spirit in that seethe and grow fierce and make itself the ally of what judges the just? And in noble souls, it endures and wins the victory and will not let go until either it achieves its purpose or death ends it all. Or as a dog is called back by the shepherd. It is called back by the reason within and calmed. So they're saying that we got reason, we got appetites, but we have this other part that gets angry at injustice. And our reason uses it like a shepherd would use a dog to protect the flock. And it's what they call the spirited part, the thumos. So there's the three parts in the psyche that are similar to the three parts of the society. There's the guardian, the reasonable part of us that is our own guardian that looks over, that makes our decisions for us. There's the spirited part, like a soldier that protects us. It's really our emotions. It has to do with what we care about, what's important to us. And it responds to injustice with anger to fight for what's right. And then there's our appetites. It's the part that basically keeps us alive, has to do with pleasure and pain, but it can get out of control if it's not managed. And then, of course, we already know what justice is. And so, again, does that fit inside the psyche? Yes. Through these waters, then, we have with difficulty made our way, and we are fairly agreed that the same kinds, equal in number, are to be found in the state and in the soul of each one of us. That a healthy soul or psyche is one where each part minds its business. There's a role for each part of our mind to play. And in modern psychology and neurology, there are three parts to the brain that each have these different parts that it plays. But a healthy psyche is one where they're tending to their respective business under the guide of reason. Reason and your passions keep your appetites in check. And that is where justice lies, in the relationship between the parts and an agreement among the parts, so to speak, that this is how we'll get along together. Now, more on the tetradic or four-part psyche, right? So appetite, spirit, reason, and autopraxia, auto-self. Praxia is practice, what you do, doing your own, minding your business. Justice is not in regard to the doing of one's own business externally, but with regard to that which is within. Not having allowed any part of himself to do the business of other parts, but he must have managed his own well and ruled himself and set all in order and become reborn is really what the word means. And Book 10 of the Republic, this comes up again. Rebirth, that once, if you're not already just and well balanced, when you come to understand this and dedicate yourself to balancing your psyche, you're born anew, so to speak. And now a friend to yourself. This is an important emphasis that Plato or Socrates puts on a healthy psyche as a friend to the self, not in a selfish way. It is about the self, but in a healthy way, you treat yourself like you would treat a friend. This is something in psychotherapy that I have to talk to almost everybody about. We often are our own worst enemy. We often would treat other people that we care about. We do treat other people that we care about better than we treat ourselves. We give advice to people. Often we know like what's the best thing to do in a lot of circumstances for other people. And it's good advice. But when we're in that same circumstance, we don't take that advice. Instead, we attack ourselves. We get down on ourselves. We're negative. So Plato's really hitting on something that is universal in humanity. That is really an important part of being healthy. Why wouldn't you treat yourself as well as you would treat somebody you care about? Now, it's not selfish because, again, it's like, treat others the way you want to be treated. This is like the flip of that. That's not the problem. Most people treat others, at least the ones they care about, better than they treat themselves. But it's about equality. It's about justice. It now remains for us to consider whether it is profitable to do just things, practice fine ones, and be just, whether or not one's being such remains unnoticed. Or is it better to be unjust, provided one doesn't pay the penalty and get punished? So, the first question is, what is justice? The second question is, okay, we know what justice is. So now we know what it is. Is it really better to live a just life, even if nobody else knows that you're just? Or is it better to live an unjust life, to lie, cheat, steal, be lazy? If you can do that and nobody else knows, you can get away with it. Nobody will know that you're that way. Nobody will know that you're a criminal. You'll never get caught. You'll never get punished for it. What they conclude is it's better to be just, because being just is not about the external as much as it's about the internal. And so if you live unjustly, you'll live unhealthily, and you won't be able to enjoy all the spoils of those things you lie, cheat, steal for. What comes to mind, an extreme case, is Saddam Hussein. Now, this might be another time it would be better to talk about him as an example, but that's an example of somebody who could lie, cheat, steal, do whatever he wanted because he had all the power. Gosh, shouldn't he have a great life? Because he was the power for decades. He did whatever he wanted to, or like many kings in history or so forth. But how did Saddam Hussein die? Pretty poorly. More than that, though, how did he actually live? We find that he didn't have any friends he could trust. He didn't have anybody he could trust, or even the people he could trust, he didn't trust because of his unjust way of thinking and being. He would put people to death that probably would have stood by his side and been on his side because he was so paranoid, because he was so corrupt. So that's an example of that. So they conclude that no, being just is the best way of living life, no matter what the external circumstances are, because it has to do with your very being is either healthy or unhealthy. And being healthy in reality is only going to make your life better in how you deal with the external. And, you know, you could be rich and famous and have all the external things, but if you're psychologically eating yourself up, you know, if you don't have your physical health, but especially if you don't have your mental health, what do you have? So that's the point. But Socrates, that inquiry looks to me as though it has become ridiculous by now. So that's what Glaucon, I think, who's talking, says, like, what, we don't even need to go and have that discussion anymore. After seeing what a just person is, just psyche, it's obvious that it's better to live a just life no matter what. Justice is superior to injustice because health is superior to disease. So mic drop again. So here's another point in the book, The Republic, that if you wanted to have basic understanding and get the point, you could end here, which is at the end of book 4, and there's 6 more books. At this point, you know, the first point is with Cephalus in the first few pages. How do you live a good life? By having a good character. It's based on your character. But what is that? How do you get that? Now we're at a point where we know what a good character is. It's a just psyche, different parts to our psyche, and how to balance those out. And it is better to live a just life. Mic drop could be done, but there's much more. And I might end it here and make this a 2-parter because I'm going very long. Well, I'm just going to power through. I can always cut up the video. So now we're at book 5, The Philosopher King. So book 5, 6, and 7, I'm going to just do a very general overview. They're dense. There's lots of information in books 5, 6, and 7. It's considered by many to be the apex of the Republic, in that it's the conversations are about the loftiest matters. So what's more lofty than how to live a good life? Well, lofty is like what is true being. Plato talks about epistemology, what is knowledge, the different parts of knowledge, metaphysics here in his theory of forms, and so forth. So I'm just going to go over them briefly and kind of relate them to the Tetradic Psyche. But for those who aren't familiar with the Republic, and just for continuity, I'm just going to touch on a few things in book 5. So if we do discover what justice is, are we to demand that the just man shall differ from it in no respect, but should conform in every way to the ideal? Or will it suffice us if we approximate it as nearly as possible and partake of it more than others? The answer is that will content us. A pattern then is what we wanted. So what this is saying is, okay, they're going to go on to talk about, okay, so we figure out what a just life is. Let's imagine this just person, this perfectly just person. What would his life, how will he live his life? What will that be like? It's like, well, wait a minute. Are we to expect ourselves to be able to live perfectly just? Or are we just looking for an ideal that we can refer to try to improve ourselves, to work towards? That's what we're looking at, a pattern, a reference point. Nobody expects perfection. And so that's that little discussion there. I think it's a good point. for all of us to keep in mind, that there's ideals we strive for, but we don't expect to ever reach perfection. Then in book 5, Socrates unleashes 3 waves of controversial ideas. I'll just hit on those quickly. The first wave is men and women will receive the same education. So yes, women can become philosopher queens. In 420 BC, whenever this was, I guess it would have been, it's more like 370 BC when this is written, but it's set in 4 something BC, so it's 2,500 years ago. The idea of women being educated and educated equally with men and having the equal ability, mental ability to men, that's a controversial idea. But that's what Plato says in this book, that, now they're talking about external philosopher kings and queens in an ideal society. But remember, anytime they're talking about that, very little of that, I think, has to do with actual society. It has to do with internal government. But I think what he's saying is that women have the same essential intellectual makeup as men. There are physical differences. They talk about there's, men are physically stronger, and there's some jobs that are better suited for a man's body. But when it comes to leading society, which is what a philosopher king or queen is going to do externally, or leading ourselves, women are fully capable of that. And of course, would need to do that for themselves as well and be educated the same way. Wave number 2, the abolishment of the family. So this is a biggie. If the Republic is about establishing a utopia in society, there's some really ugly things that are recommended here and have actually been used by real leaders, tyrants, over the years. And they refer to Plato's Republic as like, this is what Plato recommended. And one of these things is like the abolishment of the family. Like, so in here, men and women are going to hook up. They're going to be chosen who they hook up with, and it's going to be temporary, and it's going to rotate. It's going to be all kinds of weird things about how you choose mates, but nobody's going to know who their own children are. Children will be brought up in a society where you won't know. Anyways, I'm not going to go into the details of it. But the main thing is, like, this is not about a real society. Wave number 3 is the most controversial, at least in the book. They really freak out about this. And it seems less controversial than the last one. But the biggie, unless, said I, Socrates, either philosophers become kings in our states, or those whom we now call our kings and rulers take the pursuit of philosophy seriously and adequately, there could be no cessations of troubles, dear Glaucon, for our states, nor I fancy for the human race either. So this is the whole thing, like philosopher king. A just society there won't be one until there's a philosopher king. Our kings become philosophers. And in reality, this has never happened. By the end of this book, you'll see it's not proposed that it ever will happen, but the closest to it ever actually happening in Western history, people often cite Marcus Aurelius. He was emperor. So he was king. He was more than king. He was emperor. He was king over kings. In Rome, back in like 180 AD. Or was it? Yeah, it was 80. And he was a philosopher. He was a Stoic philosopher. And Stoic philosophy came out of Socrates. And there's a lot of similarities. But anyways, moving on. More in book 5, Philosopher Kings. Do we not remember that we said that those loved and regarded okay. This kind of doesn't make sense out of context, but they're talking about what is it to be a philosopher king? And it's not just about a thirst for knowledge, because there's different types of knowledge and there's different levels of knowledge. And what they're saying is they're talking about people who like to go to the museum and look at fine art, and they say, wow, that's a really beautiful painting, or that's a really beautiful song, and they appreciate beauty, and they appreciate science, and they appreciate these different things, but they don't have an appreciation for beauty itself or justice itself, which is a way that Plato or Socrates separates out what a philosopher is. A philosopher looks to find out what the purest ideal of a thing is, understanding it not just in this example, but how this is an example of something. So if it's beautiful, what is the beauty that this is an example of? So shall we then offend their ears if we call those people who just like, oh, that's pretty, if we call them doxophilists? Doxa is opinion, philist or philo is love. So we all know people who love opinions, who have opinions, who like to throw out opinions, but they don't necessarily have a way to back up that opinion. And, you know, this is relativism also, like, well, that's beautiful to me. It might not be beautiful to you. There's not a belief in or desire to figure out, like, what is beauty itself, or what is it about this thing that makes it beautiful? So he'll call them doxophilists, or I'd say philosodoctors. Anyways, no, philosodoxis, sorry, rather than philosophers. And will they be angry if we so speak? This is Socrates and Glaucon going back and forth. Not if they heed my counsel, for to be angry with the truth is not lawful. So I like that little quote. To be angry with the truth is not lawful. Well, it's lawful in this country, but it's maybe awful. It's not wise. It's not good. It's not helpful. The truth is truth. We should figure it out. Reality is reality. We should realize how to live with it. So I like that little quote. Be angry with the truth is not sane. But also this whole thing of just what is a philosopher going to be like? It's not just somebody who likes to learn things. Then to those who in each and every kind welcome true being, lovers of wisdom and not lovers of opinion, is the name we must give them. Right. Okay. Now, books 6 and 7 are on this chart. I'm not going to go over this chart. It's dense. There's so much information here. It is some of the most beautiful, helpful things that are ever written in philosophy. It's the idea of the good as the highest level of knowledge, the comparison of the good with the sun. The sun gives us light so that we can see things. Remember, this is before there was electric light. And the good gives us knowledge so we can understand things. And without some understanding of what good is, no other knowledge or possession will do you any good. So if you're rich, but you don't know the difference between good and bad, that money isn't going to do you much good. You're not going to spend it wisely. So the highest level of knowledge is the good. Then he goes over the divided line, 4 levels of knowledge and 4 objects of cognition. So 4 levels of cognition or knowledge or ways of thinking, and 4 objects of cognition. And then there's the cave, Plato's cave. It's a beautiful analogy. And there's 4 levels of the cave that correspond with these 4 levels of thought. So these are just different ways that he is teaching us a lot of things. In this part, you know, it's about epistemology, the different levels of knowledge. But I would say that it's 4 each time. And it corresponds with the 4 parts of the psyche, because modern neuroscience would say, has shown that, you know, there are different parts to the brain that have different functions. And There's a good book called On Intelligence that really shows that the processing that our brain does in every part of the brain mimics these 4 levels. But main thing here is 4. Down below, towards the bottom of this chart, there's the instruments of knowledge. That doesn't come out of the Republic. That comes out of the 7th letter written by Plato. But again, he's talking about, to understand anything, you see there's 4 instruments we use. The image of it, the name of it, the definition of it, and then there's the knowledge that we eventually get. The bottom is the Stoic hand of knowledge. So the Stoics came along 100 years or so after Socrates, and went on and still exist, I guess. Stoicism, again, Marcus Aurelius was a Stoic. They come out of Socrates, if not Plato, maybe more Xenophon's writings on Socrates than Plato's writings on Socrates. But because they come from the same source, there's a lot of overlap. But one thing they use to explain different levels of knowledge or understanding is called the Stoic hand of knowledge. And I think it explains all of this nice and easy, or in a simple way. So the Stoic hands of knowledge, it's like we're all trying to learn things. It's like we're reaching our hand outward. I always think of it like if you're in a dark room, you can't see anything, you're walking, you're holding your hand out there because you don't want to bump your head, right? But you hold your hand out, and when you're just reaching, you might just touch something. You're getting just a little bit of information. Your senses are just, through your fingers, are getting a little bit of information. You're touching it. That's like conjecture. Like, I think this is a phone, but I don't have enough information yet. I don't know if it's a phone or not. I'm just guessing. It could be a phone. It could be a wall, whatever. The next part of the hand of knowledge is to actually grasp the thing. So now you're touching more of it, so to speak. You know, this is again an analogy. You kind of got a handle on it, and I can feel more of it now. I know it's not a wall. I believe it's a phone. So you're feeling it. That's at the level of belief, or doxa. A doxophilist believes in a certain thing as beautiful, but they can't explain why it's beautiful. They just believe it. That's just what I think. You know, it's from their experience. It's what they believe, but they don't have any scientific knowledge to back it up.